Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Game Time Podcast. Just got done talking NBA playoffs and NBA Finals preview, and what's next for a couple teams when we get to the off season. But it's now time for the wraparound segment. This is a segment we do almost every, I want to say every other episode, just so we can talk about maybe some sports that we haven't been talking about, and that's what I'm going to use my segment on. So the NASCAR Cup Series is what I'm going to hit on today, Daryl, because last weekend they had their first broadcast on Amazon Prime. NASCAR has been on Fox, ESPN, NBC. They've been on cable for the longest, right? And you're seeing these sports leagues start to add streaming. WWE is on Raw. Their Monday Night Raw is on Netflix full time now. You've got NFL dipping their toe into streaming with Thursday Night Football on Amazon. Some Netflix games on Christmas. The NBA just signed a deal with Amazon, and now NASCAR dips their toe in the water. It's 5 races on Amazon Prime, so it's a real small dip into the water for NASCAR in that case. But they got 2.72 million viewers for the Coke 600. The Coke 600 is one of the biggest races that NASCAR can have. It got 3 million last year on Fox, and I'm seeing a lot of old head NASCAR fans say, "Oh, well, they should have stayed on Fox because they didn't get the ratings that they wanted." And my rebuttal is, and I think everyone's whining because it's like, "Oh, I have to pay to watch this now." And first off, it's only 5 races, right? And I think NASCAR would have been a fool not to test out streaming in an age where we're turning into streaming. And the second part is Amazon did something really cool where you can do a 30-day free trial of Amazon, and it'll cover all 5 of the NASCAR Cup Series races that go on Amazon Prime. And I think that's a great thing to do because at some point or another, when this next TV deal comes up for NASCAR, it's mostly, I think they're going to do one half Fox or NBC and the other half is going to be Amazon. I think the Amazon NASCAR partnership is going to be really good for NASCAR because the quality of the broadcast, and we were talking about this last week with ESPN and TNT and the NBA, they treat the sport so serious. When you have Dale Earnhardt Jr., Carl Edwards, when you have these former drivers that have that name value, especially Dale Earnhardt Jr., when you have those guys, and not only that, Amazon Prime and TNT, because they're going to share the same staff, because Amazon's covering 5 of the races, TNT's covering 5 of the races for the summer. When you give Dale Earnhardt Jr. creative control and you listen to what the fans want, it turns out to be a great product. You know, who would have thought? I give a lot of props to what Amazon did in their first coverage. They're doing their second race today at Nashville Super Speedway. But I give a lot of credit to Amazon and the way they covered that broadcast. It treated the sport really serious, and that's something that NASCAR has lacked in its identity the last couple of years, is not taking itself serious, especially on the Fox broadcast sides of things. Like even with the Indy 500, Fox did not do a great job covering the Indy 500 this year when it came to camera work and production and stuff like that. The marketing was great, and it gave them great viewership, but marketing can only get you so far when the broadcast is just so poor. So I give Amazon a lot of credit. The new TV deal NASCAR just signed, it just went into effect this year. I think it's a 7 or 8 year deal. But I hope when this contract ends, I'd love to see Amazon Prime take the first half of the year. So from Daytona to Indy, and then the back half of the year can go to NBC, whoever wants the championship. But really impressed with what Amazon did. And to all the old NASCAR fans that are mad that 5 races are on streaming, you're going to have to get over it because NASCAR would have been a fool not to dip their toe into the water when it comes to streaming. Daryl, I know you're not a big NASCAR guy, but what are your thoughts on them dipping their toe into streaming and because they're getting a lot of
Well, you
positive
have to.
feedback?
Well, I
Yeah,
think you have to because this is 2025, not 1975.
yeah,
So you got to go where the money is, right? Because everything's going up. Cost of everything's going up. So sponsorships going up. Vehicle maintenance going up. All these things, contracts going up. So if they didn't dip into the streaming process, they're like baseball with saying, we've got these unwritten rules and we're going to stick to it.
yeah.
No, you got to evolve, right? And while I'm not a huge NASCAR fan, I follow enough to understand, and I know the economics impact that they have when we're going to streaming because streaming services what everybody's looking for now. because it's cheaper than your whatever cable or your satellite provider, whatever the case may be. So you can pick what you want.
And the big thing too that Amazon got a lot of credit for is commercials. The big thing that Fox has done a horrid job with is so many commercials. I think 42 minutes of a Fox NASCAR broadcast this year was commercials. 42 minutes. NASCAR on Amazon, all of their commercials, other than two, were picture in picture.
Yeah.
And they gave them a pre-race show and a post-race show. NASCAR hasn't had a pre-race and post-race in years, ever since you remember the Speed Channel?
Yes.
That's the last time they did a post show for NASCAR.
But you know why? Because like you just said, the old heads, we don't want that. We want to keep it like we've always done it. And that doesn't work in today's. Let them stream and see what else is getting. I'm old enough to remember when they first put cameras in the cars.
Yes. Yep, in-car cameras, yeah.
It's that, right. So you got to evolve in what you're trying to do. And I don't knock them at all for that, because again, NASCAR had been losing some of their luster from the casual fan, right?
Yes.
That's what the NBA wants to do by the in-season tournament, right? Casual fans. NFL, they want to do what? Add more games, allow players to dance. Why? For casual fans. So what do you do for the casual fan of NASCAR, right? Or from Winston Cup to all of that, right?
Yep.
You got to find a way, right? It used to be guys would fight.
Yes.
They would get out of the car and they'd fight. The old saying what Darrell Walter would say, if you ain't rubbing, it ain't racing.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yep.
So now you got to find another avenue. And I think that avenue is the streaming services that's going to put people who haven't been watching it.
Yeah.
They've got a $29 package or a $39 package. Let me take a look at this real quick.
And I think the other thing that NASCAR has to do a better job of is marketing. And I think if you look at F1, the reason F1 has become so popular in the States is because they have a hit show on Netflix. I don't know if you've heard of it, Drive to Survive. It has rocketed its popularity in the States when it comes to F1. F1 used to have one race in America. It now has one in Texas, Vegas, and Miami. In Miami, they race around Hard Rock Stadium. NASCAR just inked a deal with Netflix, I believe last year or 2 years ago, to do their own style of documentary on Netflix. And that's where it starts, right? Is getting that type of marketing, having that yearly documentary that covers the championship as a whole, because that's what's made F1 so popular. So I like the direction NASCAR is in, but then it goes back to the product side of it, right? A lot of people want to see NASCAR up the horsepower on these cars. Right now, the horsepower is about at 650 when it comes to these cars, and it's made the short track racing at Martinsville, Bristol, it's made it abysmal. I'd like to see the horsepower go up to 750, 800. It's never going to get to 900 or 1,000 like it was in the 2000s. Right. I'm just going to say it like it is. But, marketing and all that can only do so much. And then when you look at the product, we talk about the NBA and the flopping. I think for NASCAR, it has to be the execs have to get out of their own way. And they need to move the horsepower up at certain tracks, specifically the short tracks. And I think the other thing is you got to get more manufacturers into the sport. You've got Toyota, Chevy, and Ford. And then you look at F1, they're adding Cadillac, they're adding Audi, and they already have Aston Martin, Ferrari, Mercedes. They're adding all these manufacturers.
But you know why?
Yeah.
It
works.
Yes. I mean, they're not stuck. It's really people say, well, they go all this expansive conversation, but no, because it works. You do things that work.
And NASCAR's they're figuring it out, but they've got to now, if you're figuring out the marketing and you're figuring all that out, but now it's about the on-track product and making that better for sure. I'm glad I got to talk about NASCAR a little bit, get that piece off.
That's good stuff, man. I like it. It's more in sports than basketball, football, and baseball, right? Yeah. So having these topics will come up because they matter. Yes. I'm sure there's gonna be some times as segments we're gonna have WWE segments. Big wrestling fan from the 80s and 90s myself.
I do. I think at some point we gotta show some love to the Stanley Cup final. Obviously that's going on. So we'll touch on that at some point as well. I want you to go ahead. What's your wraparound segment?
Well, my wraparound is a little bit of frustration with MLB right now, right? So as you look at a Major League Baseball game, they've done wonderful things with the pitch clock, the batters staying in the box, being efficient, minimizing throws to first base to hold runners on. All those things have been absolutely home runs, literally, figuratively, home runs. Here's my problem with baseball. In all three sports, they've got these unwritten rules, right? In basketball, you're up by double digits in less than a minute. You let your shot clock run out. Football, you don't dance when you're down 30, right? Mm-hmm. Baseball, guy hits a home run in the seventh inning, they're down 5-2. The guy hits a 3-run home run to tie the game up. Pitcher's been clocking him all series long. He's hit him a couple of times. He's gotten hit. He's struck out 3 times. Man, he's had a frustrating time. Bottom of the 7th, bottom of the 6th, whatever the case may be. It's a 3-run home run to tie the game up. He can't stand in the box and watch the ball go out. That is something that ties into the fans, man. Fans like that. It's interactive for the fan. You're sitting there as a home team or as an away team. You're sitting there watching the fruits of your labor go over that right field wall, right? And because you're excited about what happened, you celebrate. There's no other league that doesn't allow celebration. Look at soccer. They run and they slide in the grass. Yep. Look at NASCAR. After they win, they do the donuts.
The burnout. Yep.
They do all that. Look at football. They dance in the end zone. Look at basketball. They got the mannerism, the shimmies and all that. What does baseball have? Baseball is the proverbial get off my lawn guy now. And if they don't wake up to allow more personality in the game, allow guys to be themselves and to have some fun, they're going to continue to fall behind basketball and football from a popularity perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've done some good things to help speed the game up, but these unwritten rules when it comes to a guy sitting and watching the game, and I'm not talking sitting for 15 seconds. I'm talking about 3 to 5 seconds, watching that ball go over the wall, and then he's going around the base with the first baseman, shortstop, third baseman, and catcher all saying negative, non-positive things to him as he hits the bag. Because you don't do that in our league. That's an unwritten rule. I just don't agree with that. And I believe if baseball doesn't get their head out their ass, they're going to continue to fall behind, and people are not going to talk about baseball like they want them to. It just doesn't. And especially on top of that, you've got a sport which I think has the best union in all of sports. It's not even close. Baseball, the baseball union is the players' union in baseball is head and shoulders above the other unions combined. Mm-hmm. Those guys said, we're not taking a salary cap. You want to cancel the World Series? Go ahead. We're not bowing down. So these guys these players have power. They've got power. There's no salary cap. One of the problems is you got the highs and the lows. You got the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, Anaheim Angels, maybe one other team, maybe either the White Sox or the Cubs.
The Giants?
Money, I'm talking about marketing wise.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's
And that's part of the issue. Every team doesn't have an opportunity to win. Look what the White Sox did last year. Now, I think, if I remember right, is it the West Coast team? Is it Seattle that's struggling this year? I forget who's struggling very mightily versus what the White Sox struggled last year. There's very little parity because there's no salary cap. I get it. You got the highs and the lows, and I get that. But baseball is kind of eating his own self. Yeah. And I think, in 10 years, if something, I'm not advocating for a salary cap. I love the fact that the union says, no, we're not doing it. Mm-hmm. I love it. They're in charge. But baseball can do other things. It's not just the salary cap.
Because I think you could make the argument, and I'm not a big fan of both, but I watch. You could say the NHL is in a better place than the MLB at the moment, right? You got these rivalries that are forming. The Panthers and the Oilers are facing off for the second year in a row. And obviously, you just talked about parity. Like I said, I'm not a big hockey fan, but I try to keep up. Hockey's had a good string of champions as of late. The Tampa Bay Lightning had a good little dynasty there, and then you've got the Panthers and the Oilers going at it. McDavid is, from what I hear, is the best player in the league, and he's trying to get a Stanley Cup.
TV perspective, the game of hockey, they've got the puck tracker, and they got these other things that they're doing to
TNT's coverage is really well. Yeah,
they're doing those things. So that's what you got to do because as a kid, for me growing up, I didn't watch any hockey.
Yeah.
But now, as you get older, like, man, it's kind of interesting. And the people who I know that go to games, so man, nothing like
There's
a
yes,
hockey game, man, in person.
there's nothing.
Because hockey in person is the equivalent of football on TV, right? You
Yeah.
know, you don't want to go. I mean, yes, you're going to go to a football game, but it's better on TV.
Yeah.
Hockey is better in
It's
person.
so much better in person. I went to Indy Field games in Indy, and obviously that's not the NHL level, but it's just like I'm like if those games are good, imagine the NHL games and the
Yeah,
environment and the crowd. I've heard people say, and I'm kind of one of those people as well, where it's hard to get into hockey through the TV, but
yeah,
if you go in person, it definitely hooks you. And I'm kind of that same way. So I keep up with hockey just because
yeah,
ever since I went to some field games before the pandemic, I've always kind of kept up with hockey and I'll watch it while it's on. So a big shout out to the NHL because I've got some love for hockey, and I think that's the problem with baseball right now. I think baseball is just at an unattractive point for a lot of casual fans and
yeah,
fans at heart. I think it's just become an unattractive sport the same way a couple NASCAR was an unattractive sport about a decade ago, and I think it's starting to find its way back, but you could say still in the eyes of the viewer, it's not as attractive as F1.
yeah,
And I think baseball's in that same spot. It's just not
yeah.
attractive at the moment.
I would agree with that. You know, the team I was talking about was Colorado Rockies. They're currently 9-49. They're
Oof.
on worse pace than the White Sox were last year.
And I said it to my brother because he's playing baseball right now. I think baseball, it's one of the hardest sports to win in for sure. But I think, and I may get flack for this. Once again, I'm not a big baseball fan. I don't understand why they play so many games. I feel like if you shortened the season, I think it would make
Yeah,
it matter more, and I
but
think
you're
more
talking
people would
revenue, right? You're
watch.
talking revenue, and how it started was that because of the fact that the baseball is not as taxing physically as an NFL game or even as an NBA game. Think about it.
Yeah,
A guy could take the game off, and he comes in the eighth inning and pinch hits. You know, takes a couple swings and he's done. Right?
yeah.
That's a day off, right? That's why it's the boys of summer. That it started in April, and back then it ended in September. The regular season, the playoffs were in October, and that was it.
Hmm.
Hence the name Mr. October for Reggie Jackson. But that's the thing. You know, you got all these dates, and you got a game that's played in the summer. You know, kids are out of school in a good part. That was the genesis of that, right? You know, yes, it's changed, but these owners aren't going to be willing to give up any money because the salaries are continuing to grow, and there's no cap. So that I
Yeah.
don't anticipate there ever being less than 81 home dates for all the teams.
I just think the season being so long is definitely got to play a factor. I think if the season was shorter, I think it would make it more attractive to a casual audience rather than all these games
Yeah,
being played. But I understand it. It's like as an NBA fan, I enjoy, being home at 10 o'clock and I look and there's an NBA game on. So it's like I understand why, as an MLB fan, they probably love it, because
yeah,
you turn on your TV and it's like, oh,
all around.
there's a
But
baseball game on. So
also
I get it though.
you got games at 1 o'clock in the afternoon too,
Yep.
and that was that benefit as well, right? You can take your kids to the ballpark at 1 o'clock, and now the game is done by 3:30,
And you got the
and
rest of
you're
the
way
day.
home, right? So yeah, you got your day. It's not just a night game like it is for NBA for the most part. There are day games in NBA as a latter part of the season on a Saturday or Sunday, and I get that. But or on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, but for the most part, those games are in the evening. Like the finals example, the first game of the finals on Thursday is going to be at 8:30 p.m. Eastern
Yeah.
in the East. So you're talking about now, mind you, the other thing is they did away with the 20-second timeout. And then and during the playoffs, the timeouts that they've added 45 seconds. So
Hmm.
natural timeouts are now 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So imagine games going to start at 8:30 and say there's, I don't know, say there's 32 fouls. And then there's timeouts, right? So you're talking about this game isn't going to be over till midnight.
Yeah. Well, you kind of talked about NBA there a little bit, so I guess to end off this wraparound segment, we'll get into some rumors when it comes to the NBA, kind of get back to where we ended off in the last segment. We start in Toronto with the Raptors. The Raptors are reportedly looking to land a big name player on the trade market per Brian Windhorst. I don't want to get too, this is Windhorst, quote, I don't want to get too far afield from this, but since this has come up, the Raptors are a team that is starting to make a noise within the league about looking for a big fish. Masai Ujiri is obviously the one that got Kawhi Leonard from San Antonio to Toronto. It resulted in a championship, and ever since Kawhi up and left, Toronto's kind of just been hanging in the air. Scotty Barnes is an all-star. They traded for Brandon Ingram and paid him. They have RJ Barrett. They got quickly. They've got a decent roster over there in Toronto. I think there was a report we read on this pod where I said Giannis wants to stay in the East, and Toronto and Brooklyn are those two spots that were kind of listed there. I have been keeping Toronto in the back of my mind through this whole offseason. We've talked about offseason moves, and I'm happy to see this report because I think Toronto has a roster in picks that could make them relevant or an interesting move. It's not a big market, but it's not a small market either. It's one of those, I'm going to say, middle of the road markets. It's probably leaned towards more big market than small.
Right.
I could see Toronto making some type of move this offseason for a big name. Now, what is a big name? You guys can make that description, but I could see them making a name for a big guy that could be a second or number one option, but I'm going to say second option.
So do you think Scotty Barnes is your one guy then? You think he's your one?
Yeah, I'll sit there and yeah, I would say Barnes is their number one. He's an all-star for sure. And I don't think he's had the chance to be the number one guy yet. I think the playoffs will determine that once they get to the playoffs, but he's got the stats to back it up. For now, I'll say yes, he's the number one option, and Brandon Ingram's number two. But I could see them making a move. I'm curious what you think as well. But yeah, in this scenario, we'll say Barnes is the number one guy.
It's tough, man, because you've got Brandon Ingram. You signed that deal to. He's going to be making 38 next year. You got Emmanuel Quickly. He's going to be making 32 and a half for the next two seasons for Toronto. And then you're talking about Scotty Barnes. Next year he goes into his deal and starts at 38 million. They've got three guys over 30 million right there, and none of those guys are championship winning players. So if I'm those folks in Toronto, I'm looking to do something because the way you're constructed right now isn't going to work. You know, you're because of money, because the players you've got, it's not even close. It's not even close to a winning situation. I mean, look at their team. Quickly's a decent player, but that guy's, he's going to be making 32 million for the next 3 years. Then you got, drop off from there. You got some salaries coming off with, PJ Tucker and Chris Boucher. Grady Penis is going to look like he's going to be a player. I don't want to say his name.
Yeah.
So I just, for me, you're going to have to give up one of those three big contracts. And who's going to take on Brandon Ingram for the next 3 years after this season? Who's going to take on 4 years of Emmanuel Quickly at 32.5 million? I just think they've got a tough fit unless they go big three, and then all of a sudden you get all these guys that are making 4 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. They got to come off your books. Then I'm
gonna say John Morant. That's where I'm gonna sit on. I'm gonna off early thoughts. I'm gonna say John Morant. We are not gonna talk about the Zion stuff on this podcast. I obviously
that's tough, man. That's tough. I'm looking at their roster.
I know, but I could see that. We're not gonna talk about Zion on here. I kind of put my piece out on Twitter. Daryl wants no part of that, and I don't blame him. Yeah, we're not gonna bring that up whatsoever. We're gonna keep moving on with these rumors though, and I think before we go, no, we'll start with the two guys that are in New Orleans, and that's Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. There's some betting odds on where they'll end up. Trey Murphy is the Denver Nuggets are the favorites to land Trey Murphy. The Nuggets at plus 500 and the Pacers at plus 700. They're tied with San Antonio at plus 700.
For Murphy?
For Trey Murphy the third. Yep. And then when you look at Herb Jones, the Mavericks are the favorite to land Herb Jones at plus 350, and then the Lakers at plus 500. So I'm just curious to see what you think of both of those players. Both players are really good defensively. I feel Trey is the better offensive player out of the two, if I can remember correctly. I wouldn't mind both of those moves for either teams. As a Lakers and Pacers fan, I mean, hey, you know what? I'm fine splitting that. I get one of those guys, you get the other. Fine with me. I wouldn't be opposed to it. But I've already said, as a Lakers fan, I really want Nicholas Claxton. I saw a mock trade that had Jared Vanderbilt. I think maybe Rui in the deal as well. I really want to see the Lakers get Claxton. I don't want to see him get Miles Turner because that would kind of interrupt my Pacers fandom there as well. So
Tough. It's tough, man, because I'm looking at Murphy. Murphy's a big guard, obviously, but I don't think we need a big guard. I mean, granted, his salary will work well for the Pacers because he's got 4 years left. He's got 25, 27, 29, and 31. So that's what you would love Miles Turner at, right?
yeah,
But if you look to do something like that, you're like a donut, though. You got a hole in the middle, and Murphy doesn't help you in that area.
yeah.
I just, the Pacers are going to have to be really, really ginger with this
Hmm.
situation, right? Herb Jones is a nice player from Bama. He's a big guy, but he's not a stretch guy, right? He's
Yeah.
big. He just seems he plays bigger than he's listed, right?
Yes.
Good defensive player, but he's not a he doesn't do anything exciting offensively. So I don't know, man. I think either of those guys are good players. I just don't know that you look at those guys as a replacement guy, even from a salary perspective for Turner. I think you go all in on Turner, you figure it out from there. You start with Turner. Once you get that framework in play, then you start working on how do we keep him.
I think New Orleans is a really interesting situation right now because there is a report from Kevin O'Connor that says New Orleans doesn't have any untouchable players on their roster.
No,
Quote, there are no untouchables in New Orleans. League sources say the Pelicans are gauging the market for everyone on their roster. They very well could end up they very well could end up keeping their core pieces, namely Zion Williamson, but it appears the Pelicans are looking into taking different paths this summer depending on what opportunities become available. So we'll have to see
well,
what happens out there in New
well,
Orleans.
I'll tell you this too. Here's the other thing with that. CJ McCollum is going into his last year of a $30 million deal as well, right?
Yeah.
So if there's going to be some movement, you're talking about it probably having some type of tie-in with CJ McCollum because
Yep.
you're gonna have to get back. You're going to try to get back more than you give, and giving up an expiring contract, 1 year deal can be a pretty good thing for a team.
Yeah.
But
We'll see how that goes. Let's move on to Detroit. The Pistons are expected to show interest in a stretch big such as Turner or Nas Reed. This comes from Mark Stein. Quote, the Pistons are among the teams with interest in Timberwolves big man Reed, league sources say Detroit is known to covet a floor spacing big man, and according to sources, is likewise said to hold interest in Indiana's Miles Turner. Whether the Pistons have a tangible shot at acquiring either player, mind you, is far from clear. So that
that,
comes from Mark Stein.
that's tough, man. They've got Isaiah Stewart with 3 years left at 15 million. I don't think anybody wants to touch him at all. Other than that, they got Tobias Harris. Next year is his last year. Tim
Yep.
Hardaway had a 1 year deal, which is good for them. And then Malik Beasley is on an expiring deal as well. So adding a stretch guy is realistic with what they've got because if you take on Isaiah Stewart at 15 million, you think, oh, that's a lot of money. Yes, it is a lot of money, but in the NBA, it's not. And then
Mm-hmm.
on top of that, you got a guy like Tobias Harris who's expiring. And then you've got Malik Beasley, who's a vet you brought in, and you still got Jalen Duren on the cheap for the next 2 years, 6 million and 8 million.
God, yeah. I
So
it's gonna be an
yeah,
interesting offseason for sure
really,
because I think teams in the East with Tatum going down, I think they feel a sense of urgency to catch up to, let's say, Indiana and New York. Obviously we talked about the Orlando and Cleveland thing, and when I think in that regard, Daryl, I think in that regard when there's smoke, there's fire. I think
mm-hmm.
we could see that trade realistically happen. And the last report I have for us is Knicks players and coaches were reportedly frustrated with Karl Anthony Towns' defensive habits. This is per The Athletic. Publicly, Knicks players made veiled comments of all season about poor communication causing their inconsistencies. Behind the scene, they and coaches expressed frustration with Towns' defensive habits, less concerned with his talent level and more with his process on that end. Too often, Towns executed incorrect coverages without communicating why he did it, after it became a theme. Players worried town didn't grasp the importance of the matter. So there's that. That's my last report that I have from NBA Central on Twitter. I would go give him a follow. You could follow Hoop Central as well. There was another one about Nikhil Alexander Walker. One moment he was a favorite to end up in. The betting odds have him at the Lakers, but then it's also saying the Magic are a team to watch for him. So that's the other report. But I didn't feel it was that notable to say. Your thoughts on the Towns comment, though?
I'd say some of it may have some validity to it, right? He on the defensive end, he just kind of seems like he's just there
Yeah.
from time to time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very talented guy. I think he just it seems like he loses his focus, right? Just like Charles asked him, "Why do you make so many dumb fouls?" And his answer was, "I don't really know." He
Oh,
says, I don't know."
okay.
Well, no, that was
Yeah, that's interesting.
I want to say it was after Game 5, if I remember right. He says, I don't know, and that tells me, I don't want to do it's your basketball IQ. That just tells me his engagement, right? He's not, he just not engaged on the. He's in other words, not what they say. He's not locked in step with the rest of the other four guys on the court.
Yeah.
He's not, because if he was, you wouldn't hear those things. But the other thing is, how is it being approached to him, right? Are you having a conversation with him, or are you just, implying things in hopes that he gets the message? This guy's almost a 10-year veteran. I would think at this stage in his career, he'd be okay to be able to share and redirect what he needs to do on the defensive end. But here's the thing: you can be mad all you want, but he ain't going anywhere. No one's going to get him. You're talking 49 this year, 53 next year, 57, then 61. So guess what? Knicks, you got to make it work. What do? Right? You got Robinson, who's very limited, very limited. So, you got a guy, they need a guy, a power guy, a Jalen Duren type guy that protects Karl Anthony Towns. He's going to protect him on the back end. OG is a good defensive player, but OG's also out there on that wing a lot, and I think that maybe Towns needs a protector. He needs a guy that he can give his guy to, because he couldn't handle Pascal on that elbow, and just like Pascal couldn't handle him as well. But you have opportunity to flip guys around, and there was no flip for that. So he wasn't going to guard Miles out at the 3-point line, so he was kind of limited. So that New York's got to figure it out. I'm glad. I don't like them anyway, so I hope they struggle mightily from now until the end of time. So they've got to figure out a way to make it work.
I hope they struggle for the rest of time. Interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't blame you. You're a Pacer fan, but I just.
But no, it's the Knicks and the Larry Johnson 4-point play, the Allen Houston big shot, the Patrick Ewing dunk, on and on and on. I just no, thank you, man.
Thank you.
I could do without, but I'm glad they're having these struggles, because it tells me that they're going to be pretty much about the same team they were this year, next year.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens. Obviously, as a Lakers fan, I'm very optimistic about what this offseason can be. We have some movable pieces. Like I said when we had our talk a couple months ago.
Movable to who? Movable to who?
Well, I mean, we got movable pieces. I'm not. Like I said, I don't think we need a big name. We need a rim runner, right? And
I thought your breaks a little bit on that.
We talked about
naming Bron or Luca or AR-15.
No, that's what I'm referring to. I think we move AR. Yeah. I think we move AR, and I think I already said I think my top priority is to get Claxton. I really want Claxton. Honestly, I wouldn't be.
He's in New Jersey still, isn't he?
Yeah, he's still in Brooklyn.
It's New Jersey still. They'll never be called Brooklyn. It's always the New Jersey.
Well, when I grew up, they were Brooklyn at that point. But I really want Claxton. I think that's kind of where I'm set on. Obviously, we've talked about Mark Williams time and time again on here, but I really do want Claxton. I don't think New York would part with Mitchell Robinson. I wouldn't be mad at Mitchell Robinson, but I think it goes back to Mark Williams. Mitchell Robinson has never been the healthiest guy out on the floor. Claxton is that lob threat that the Lakers need, that defensive presence. And then I'm curious to see how he'd fill out the rest of the roster. I've heard some Chris Paul rumors to have him come in and play backup point guard. I heard Portland has a strong interest in Chris Paul about mentoring Scooter Henderson. Chris Paul's just been on a mentor tour at this point, but I'm really curious to see how this offseason goes for the Lakers. I think, if anything, it's a very optimistic offseason. I think I haven't seen a lot of negativity where it's like, oh, we're stuck. I don't think this is a matter of, when I see people say we're stuck, I'm like, that's because you want a big name. We just traded for Luka. Well, you're not getting another big name.
It doesn't always have to be a big name.
Yeah, exactly.
The needle, right? So let's go back, right? Not just because I'm a Pacers fan. Malcolm Brogdon goes to Boston. We get this guy named
Aaron
Nesmith, and a first round pick and a bunch of throw-ins. And the talk was that Boston treated us like
don't get too crazy, but I get what she's saying.
Right. The talk was Boston just obliterated the Pacers. That was a steal deal. Look at how it's come out, right? So I would say this. I think that the Lakers have Austin Reeves in this area here because of what people see him with Bron and Luka. I think Austin Reeves is this guy. I think I think the team around him has made him look like a hell of a lot better player. And I promise you, on defense, if he's not there in LA, he's going to look like Jalen Brunson on defense.
Well, we have less than a minute, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Folks, thank you for watching. Once again, thank you to Coach Scott Moore, but that's going to do it right now.